Okay, we are at the 2013 reunion of the Ripcord Association, talking now with Dale Tower of Punta Gorda, Florida, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Dale, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself to start with, and begin with where and when were you born?
I was born in southwest Minnesota, a town called Sleepy Eye. My mom came to Sleepy Eye, or her dad came to Sleepy Eye from Germany after World War I, and so my dad was a neighboring town over by Morgan, probably 13 miles to the west, and they had homesteaded that farm prior to the Indian Uprising in 1865. So our family was rooted and raised there. There was a German prisoner of war camp after World War II in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, and I remember the folks not being proud about the time about being German. They talked about how you didn't speak German. My mom couldn't speak German. Her mom wouldn't let her speak it. It was a negative thing. And they had relatives in the prisoner camp, so they had formed a group of guys that would go out and run a thrashing crew. And that was their cousins that would come and work. And after the war, they didn't go back to Germany. There was nothing to go back to. So years later, we went with my mom and dad and my wife and I, and we went over to Germany and visited the relatives, and the older generation was, they said they'd have never survived if it wouldn't have been for the Americans sending them food and packages of survival. And so the heritage is German, I guess Bohemian German. They were Germans that lived in Czechoslovakia, got kicked out of there, and so they spoke Lower German, and then there was German relatives that stayed in Germany, and so it kind of goes back farther, but I guess both sides we were Germans. So.
Right, okay. And then did you grow up in that part of Minnesota?
I did. I grew up on a dairy farm. There was 4 brothers and sisters. I got 3 sisters and 1 brother.
Okay.
And
And then did you finish high school?
I did. It was a close call, but I had a little issue at a little partying in my senior year, some band trip, so it was quasi whether my diploma ever got signed, but the principal years later when he was dying said, Dale, you need to bring me that. I need to sign that diploma. You're going to need that in life. And I said, Lyle, I knew you always liked me, and I signed that years ago right when Mom was having the graduating party. I was pretty sure you wanted it signed, so I went ahead and did it. And it was okay. I got into some tech school after I got out of the service, and it worked. So.
All right. So when did you finish high school then?
In '69.
Okay.
I graduated in '69.
All right. And at that point, how much did you know about Vietnam?
I knew absolutely nothing about Vietnam. The little bit we'd get in the papers, but in high school we never studied, history and that nature at all. It wasn't talked about much. I knew the war wasn't going well. There was a lot of negative press. My dad would talk about it. He was a World War II veteran, and I had an uncle that was an ace pilot in World War II. So when they'd all get together, they weren't happy about the direction of the war, in Vietnam, and so you'd get glimpses of that, but really didn't care one way or another, All
right. Now, at what point did you get your draft notice?
It was our senior year of high school, and it was in the spring, and everybody was getting their number, and it would come in the mail, and kids would come to school and say, oh, I got number 235, and the discussion was, what are they taking? How high a number, And
okay. So you get this at sort of after you turn 18. You get your draft number assigned out of the lottery. Okay. All right. What was your number?
53.
All right. When you got that, did you think, okay, I'm going to go, or maybe I'll squeak by?
I knew right away that I was sort of screwed. I knew that the number was in the hundreds, or 200 maybe or something. But at the time, I knew 53 wasn't going to do the deal.
Okay.
So.
All right. And so basically, already, even as you're heading out of high school, I mean, if college doesn't look like a likely prospect right now, you're going in the service.
Well, I was trying to get into just a community college. I thought, I can pull this off. I'll be able to do that. And I had a buddy, cousin of mine, and he was his dad had bought him a car, and so he devised the plan. We're going to Canada, and he talked to his sister and told him about his plan, his older sister, and she squealed, and the plan went haywire. And so when we got pulled in for our draft notice, he did get a scholarship to Yale, but he was extremely smart, and I wasn't. I was kind of an average student, you know. Part of it just because I didn't apply myself. I'd rather tear a motor apart and build a car engine than I cared about the books. And so the plan fell through, and when they took me in for my physical, they didn't let me come home because the word had gotten out. And I think it was thanks to the local sheriff. He told them,
Okay.
he's a run risk, I think they called it.
Yeah. Now, when you're doing the physical, were there people trying to find ways to beat the system that you noticed, or?
There was actually a quasi friend of mine who was dating a cousin of mine, and his dad was a doctor, and we're in the bathroom. And he says, they're gonna do the sugar test, and he had a syringe and those little sugar packets, and he was running water on them and into a little cup, and he was injecting. He says, "Here, put this in, and you'll come back high sugar count. You'll get out. This is my third time." And he was a year older than me, and he says, "Third time I beat it, And he never did have to go because of that reason. But I wasn't into that deal, and I was kind of nervous about the whole situation, and still in denial. I figured, well, they won't. I'm a little young. They won't take me for another year. I'm going to get into the school. I'm going to go to Redwater. I think I'm okay here,
Right.
And I never. The next thing I know, I'm in a room and they're asking me, "Do you want to join the Marines?" And I said, "No, I'm not ready to go yet." And they were all asking you to have an extra 2 years, And I'm going, no, I don't want to make this decision today. But unknown to me, I wasn't making any decisions. I drove to Minneapolis, which was a couple hundred miles away, to do the physical with my dad's car, and I had to call them and say, I'm leaving the car here. I guess I'm flying out tonight. They're taking me now, and I think they were shocked also. They didn't, knowing they had told us that's how it worked.
Right, because normally it didn't work that way.
Essentially, it didn't. You got a time frame, so they grabbed me right away. So.
All right, so off you go. Where do they send you for basic training?
I went to Fort Bragg in North Carolina, I believe it is.
Right.
And we were in infantry, which, so ended up in the 101st.
Okay.
Everybody else went to...
Describe a little bit the basic training experience. What happens when you get down to Fort Bragg?
It was tough at first. You had to kind of fall under the loop, and I hadn't been out of the state hardly before, maybe to South Dakota or the Mount Rushmore one time on a trip with the family. Other than that, I'd never been anywhere. And our graduating class was like 46 kids, so, I was a little bit a duck out of water.
Okay, so some of it you're just away from home, and then it's all strange and different. How about the discipline side of it? How easy or hard was it to adjust to following orders and doing things their way?
That wasn't that big a problem for me. I'd been pretty disciplined prior to that, but I figured out in quick order that if you stand out, you're going to get, there's no volunteering. It didn't take me long to adjust to the life.
Okay, so you do it their way, and you don't draw attention to yourself.
Try to not, because they would pull you out for absolutely no reason at all. It was almost like it was your turn, but you were going to be doing push-ups for absolutely no reason.
Okay. Now, what kind of shape were you in when you went in?
Oh, it was, I was in pretty good shape. Probably, close to 200, maybe, if anything, a little chunky. I played football, but I did run track, mainly because I didn't have to stay after school for track. I could run 5 miles home and show up for a meet now and then, and so it wasn't like football. I like played football, but Dad said, no, you got to come home and work.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, you're working on a farm, and that's not exactly light duty either.
No. So compared to the other kids, no, I was in pretty good shape.
Right. Okay. So the physical part of the training and so forth, you can kind of handle.
It wasn't really a problem. No.
Okay. So is that an 8-week training course, basically?
Yeah, I think it was only 6, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems shorter than that, because they vary at periodically.
It might have been 8. I seemed like it was only 6, and then AIT.
Okay. And then where do you go for AIT?
It was like Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Okay. And was this infantry training now?
It was, and that's where I got volunteered to go to Airborne training school because nobody had volunteered.
Okay.
So it was you, and you, and part of it was the physical deal again, and the drill sergeant didn't like me. We had these Hoga stick things, and I'd kind of figured out that if you could get on the far end of that stick, you could take him off his feet, and he was kind of a short little guy. And I didn't like him, and he didn't like me, and I got volunteered.
So how long did you actually stay at Fort Jackson?
I think that was a couple months.
Okay, so you did the full 8-week AIT before
Yeah.
going on
Right.
anywhere else. All right. So now, what kinds of things are they teaching you at AIT?
Well, it was mostly field exercises for 11 Bravo, and that's what MOS they'd stuck me into. But I wanted to get out of it. I thought, I'd fit better as a mechanic because I could pull a car engine out and rebuild it, and I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Because on the farm, I'd learned that. And if you want to get yourself a car, your uncle gives you a piece of crap, and you go to the scrapyard and you find a motor and you make it work. And so I'd seen plenty of that going on because Dad and his brothers always did their own mechanic work. So I was pretty handy around a motor. So I tried to get in the motor pool, but they weren't needing anybody. But the guy told me, he says, we need clerk typists. He said, can you type? And I'd taken gear typing in high school. Wasn't the best. He said you had to type 70 words a minute. I'm pretty sure my best was probably 40 at best. So I went downtown and rented a typewriter, and I sat one whole weekend and I typed, and they said you had to have 7 or less words wrong, and type 70 words a minute. Well, I go, nobody can do this, I'm not the best at spelling, but I can't even copy that fast. And so I went in and took the test, and by golly, I got the job. I made close to 70. I think they said it was 65, and I had about 14 mistakes. But they go, we're not worried about that. We need clerical. So when everybody else left and got shipped out and I'd already been through jump school, and jump school, everybody talks about it being a big deal. I think it was only 5 days. We went and jumped off some towers initially, and then we went up in an airplane and jumped out one time, and you were jump qualified. That was it. So it was pretty weak as far as being trained.
Okay. To back into the AIT, were you getting weapons training there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what did you train on?
We trained with machine guns, M16s, and I was a good marksman. I loved to hunt, and I did like that part of it, because I was familiar with guns.
Okay. Did you try a grenade launcher or mortar or anything like that?
Yeah, use the thumper gun, and if there was an opportunity to try some, I was over there standing in line. I wanted to shoot everything because we shot some bigger weaponry than that, but you only get one time, to try it. Where we shot at a tank, and I thought, wow, that'd be cool. I want to blow something up, So that part of the training I didn't mind,
Okay. All right. So you do that. Now, where did they do the jump school?
That was right there at
Fort Jackson?
Fort Jackson, yes.
Okay. So anyway, so you've gone through that, you've done the AIT. We're getting kind of very late in the year now, in 69?
Yes, right around Christmas.
Okay. And now think you're staying on as a clerk typist?
Yeah, in fact, I got orders to go to Fort Willis, Washington, the headquarters company. That's where they sent me, and in processing. So I went home for an R&R for like 10 days, and then out to Fort Willis, Washington, and I thought, yeah, this isn't so bad. We're in Class A's, sitting there in an office, guys coming through all day. They'd be lined up outside, and funneling in, and then they'd get their clothes and then their issue, and so we'd process people to wherever they were going to be shipped.
Right.
And, so I was there probably for, it wasn't even 3 weeks. I just sort of settled in, made a couple buddies, I think only had one pass off base where I went downtown, had a few beers, and they come into the office one day, and I was busy typing up. And you didn't need to type 70 words a minute. My gosh, you were filling in blanks. You had to line it up, get it on the line, get their orders, type up their orders, and process them, and tell them to get in that line because they had to get their shots and enter this and that. So you're directing people, and you're dealing with all these scared kids, Essentially, that's what it was. Nobody knew where they were going. Everybody's displaced. They're not with their buddies anymore because they're coming in from all over. And the line did. Once in a while, there'd be some guys in a row that knew each other, And of course, everybody's always trying to, well, can you send me with so and so? Who the hell is he? No, I don't have any power. I just do this. But I'm thinking to myself, this is great. This is a wonderful situation, and we're processing guys for 2 days in a row for Korea, and replacements prior to that. We did Germany, and then we'd have stretches as all Vietnam. And we had a couple days prior we did Vietnam, and we switched everything over to Korea, so the area I was in was all Korea. And some guys were AWOL. They had like 4 guys missing. So they came in and they said, who's got time left, and how long you been in, going down the line. And somebody tattled, oh, he's a new guy, he's a new guy. And they're looking at my deal, and they go, you're 11 Bravo. I go, no, sir, I'm clerical staff. I'm with headquarters company, I'm trying to, hey, I got a home, just leave me alone, And it didn't work. They grabbed me.
Okay.
And another guy that I knew slightly for only being there a couple days, And off to the airport, they throw us in a Jeep, haul us out to a commercial airliner. And it's plumb full of guys just running. And on we go, no luggage, nothing.
Wow.
Just got my uniform, It's towards evening, it's starting to get dark. And I get on the plane, everybody's sitting there like they've been waiting a while, which is typical in the military. You stand in line and wait.
Yeah.
And I just get sitted down. I got to sit in the middle seat because that's the only one left. And I sat down. I was quiet, and I go to the guy next to me. I said, how long a flight is it to Korea? Did they tell you anything? And the guy didn't say a word to me. He stood up, unbuckled, stood up, and he said, this dumbass thinks he's going to Korea. And just like that, I knew it was all downhill. I heard everybody laugh and going, uh-oh. They didn't have to tell me. I knew exactly that was the group that had been processed a week before. They just got hung up for a while someplace. And so we went to Anchorage. They loaded onto a DC-10. The DC-10's taken off on the runway. It doesn't, apparently it was too heavy or was misting a bit, and it decides last minute to abort. So it locks up the brakes when we go through this fence at the end of the runway and off the end of the, so we got to go out the slide,
Oh boy.
And so I'm going, we're off to a good start. This is okay. Anything that can hold me up. Maybe I got a shot at getting out of this deal yet, Maybe they won't have room on the next plane, I can get back to my company. And so from there we ended up going to Hawaii. They split the group, but we entered the next day. We slept in the airport and on the chairs, and we went to Hawaii. I get to Hawaii, and the guys are getting split up into groups to get on different planes. So I finally go tell the guy there, I said, I haven't been processed. I don't have any shots. And he says, you can't go. You got to have your shots. You can't go to East Asia without your shots. You got to have records. I said, well, I don't have any clothes. I have nothing, So they took me down to a post there where they were processing people out. And they said, this guy needs stuff. So I sat there for about 10 days. I had to get my shots, and they got me some gear. And they just pieced together stuff with other guys' names on it, So I get over to Japan, and I get hung up there. So I'm stuck there for a few days. And then eventually they threw me on an Air Force flight with another guy where they were just shipping stuff. So we're not on a commercial plane now, or a seated plane. We're hanging in these little jump seats in some noisy DC 130 or something.
Yeah, some cargo plane.
Just a cargo plane. And it was kind of cold and awful noisy, and it seemed like it took 3 days, but I think it was only a day. But it took forever to get to Cameron Bay. We landed in Cameron Bay, so here I'm in Cameron Bay with a bunch of Air Force guys, no orders again. So the Air Force guy said, well, you can walk patrol, because we don't like doing that. So you can patrol the outside perimeter of the air base, So I'm walking for 2 weeks around the fence, and they let me walk for about 6 hours. And then they had air conditioning, canisters is what they were living in, which is cool. Maybe we'd go down to the beach, and so I still had no orders. I didn't belong to anyone.
All right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What was your first impression of Vietnam itself?
I thought, you know what? I'm in Vietnam. This is great. I remember writing home and telling Mom, awful lot of sun. First thing, I got sunburned pretty bad, but other than that, I'm okay.
Yeah, you're out here kind of on the beach and not much
Every
going
once
on.
in a while, some orders would come into the airport, blow some pockets in the deal, and that was about it. There was no direct combat of any kind. They grabbed me one day because I said I could fix the engines, and they took me over to a place called Tiger Beach, and it was a little R&R center where Air Force guys went, officers went for breaks, and they had a bunch of boat motors there that didn't run. They were pulling water skiers around and stuff, and essentially the motors weren't that old. All they needed was tune-ups and plugs, you know, and points. So I was fixing them, got them all running. I had one I couldn't get running, but I had to drop parts for the other ones off of that one. So I got them all running, and then I was mixing drinks for the officers up at a little tiki bar and pulling them around water skiing. And one day Major Ford come in there, and I'm dragging them around, I'm making them drinks, and I'd mix myself one, I'm having a drink with him, and he says, "Son, I like you. I need a Jeep driver, or I'm going to take you back up with me up to Da Nang." I said, "Sir, no, I'm pretty busy here, you know, I got a function." And he also pulled my name up, my social security number, and whatnot. I figured out I was 11 Bravo, and that was, by golly, I was 101st, and I belonged with them up on the, and all I knew was that's by the DMZ, and I don't like Da Nang, and I don't want to be part of that group.
All right. So roughly, when was this that happened?
That
You're
was-
now into 1970 someplace.
That was about in March.
Okay.
So I've been able to avoid 3 months in country without really being in any bad shit, you know.
All right. Now, once they finally decide to go send you someplace, then how do they get you up there?
I flew up with him on a DC-130 transport
Okay.
plane up to Da Nang, and I was going to be his Jeep driver, which I thought, well, hey, this still isn't bad, you know.
Right.
I'm experiencing some new country, and I could tell it was a little worse deal just in talking to him. Things weren't so rosy up there. And it only took me a couple of days from go to there up to Camp Evans to pretty soon I'm out to the field. So the first time I went out to the field would have been.
Just first of all, what unit do they actually assign you to in the 101st?
I got stuck in first of the 506.
Okay. And so you're D Company, first of
First of
506.
it wasn't D Company initially,
Okay.
but I think D Company was short of guys, so they tried to switch me. I think I
All
went
right.
from C to D.
Okay. So you
So-
go up there, and then now were they in camp when you got there? Or were they in the field someplace?
I was back at Headquarters Company at Camp Evans initially. Had a little experience with a guy that said I could sleep in his hooch, and it turned out he kind of liked guys or something, so that was a
Oh.
little bit of a rude awakening. So right off the bat, I wasn't trusting anybody after that, you know, because I kind of went through a wall one night, you know, things were going south. And so my first, right off the bat, impression of the local deal wasn't good, you know, and he had rank, so that's a bad situation. But a new guy comes in by the name of Berger, and we get thrown on a chopper because Major said he needed people out on this fire base, and that would have been Marines. So my first experience in the field into a unit, other than being a Jeep driver, was out in Marine. And this Berger guy went with me. Well, on the way out, he gave me a radio. He said, "You're going to be my eyes and ears on this job." So he gives me a radio. I'm supposed to tell him what's going on out there. And I look at that thing and I'm going, shit, I'm not sure I remember how to turn it on. A little scary there, you know. And this Berger kid kept looking at me, and he's going, "Yes, I'm into shortwave radio. I'm a shortwave radio operator." And I said, "How do I turn this thing on?" He said, "Oh, here's how you do it. Here's how you do it." And he knew that radio. He knew the radio well. And I says, "You know, nobody seems to care or know around here about anything. Why don't you take the radio? What job do you have?" He says, "Well, I carry machine gun ammo, and I'm supposed to learn how to walk point." So I slack man, he says. I go, "Well, that sounds good to me, because I'm not going to be good on this thing. You know, this is going to take me a while to catch on." So he grabs the radio. We get out to the field. There's going to put us in these squads. And he ends up going in one squad that stayed on Marine. I get stuck in, and when we're coming in, they're shooting at us. So first thing off the bat, I get some shrapnel, you know. So I figure, maybe I can do it back, you know, I'll get out of this deal, you know. But the medic taped me up, you know. Said, you're okay. But it kind of burns. I go,
Right.
"You'll be okay." So I get stuck in one squad. We part on the hill that night. Berger goes on top of the hill, and they say, "Which way do you want to go?" And I don't even know who the guys were that were in charge, but the one guy says, "I need him over here. I lost my slack man. He said, he asked me, what are you?" I said, "I'm supposed to be a slack guy, I guess." I'm thinking slack's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know. I don't have a clue. Didn't take long to figure out slack wasn't. Point man was not a good position.
Right.
You know? It was, you didn't have to carry quite as much maybe, but it wasn't a good position to be in. And but the guy I was with was really, really good. You know, I mean, he's talking to me, he's telling me, you're looking for plants, you're looking for. And as a kid, I used to trap mushrats and mink, and so I knew exactly what he was talking about. You know, this broke over, there's been activity, and he said you can smell them. Okay. You can smell them.
Now, is it the point man who's telling you this, or the squad leader?
The point man that was there. It was chaos, you know, you get off the chopper, everybody's hollering and they're shooting and there's incoming rounds and get down, you know, you're not sure, you're looking around, who are they hollering at, you know, and there's so much noise, you know. Finally somebody just grabs me and slams me to the ground and pulls me over in a hole and the chopper takes off and right in front of the hole there they had a bunch of bodies stacked up and I'm going, wow, this is not cool, you know, and so the first, then fear sets in, you know. Now, before that, I was naive, you know. I had no idea how bad it was, you know. And that was a week of just pure hell, you know. I don't believe I slept for a week, you know. I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay. And if that's around in March, I think that the company got into a pretty nasty firefight, took a lot of losses, and that's what that one was.
Yeah.
I think the one in Maureen where they got overrun in the night position was in May. I think one platoon did.
That would be when I was there, when it got overrun. They came over the top of the hill, got into the perimeter.
Yeah, okay, so that's, you come in, so were you with the group that moved off the hill?
We moved off the hill to the next ridge.
Right.
And then in the pre-dawn, we were moving back because we could see the battle going on. I mean, it was lit up, you know.
Yeah.
So we're essentially running through the brush trying to get back to that position to help them.
Now, were you, did your platoon get held up by enemy fire, or did you manage?
We made contact a couple times on the way back to the hill, but pretty much just kept moving that direction because we knew they were under attack.
All right, so you're in the platoon that actually gets to them first?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's not a great introduction to life in the field, then.
No, I come across the first several bodies and I found Berger, the guy that, and that's the only guy in the world I knew out there. And so I was looking for him, and I found him. And he was gone. So and blew it up pretty bad.
And that could have been you.
That would have been me.
Yeah. All right. Now, did they pull you out of the field after that? Did they take the company back somewhere?
We went back for a few days. Went to the aid station, got bandaged up, took out some shrapnel. They gave me a Purple Heart, and I go, wow, I'm brand new at this. And I'm going, well, that ain't no great, but I told them, I says, don't, this ain't gonna go anywhere, is it? I mean, I don't want my mom to hear this, you know, I'm telling her. Right. She's worried, you know, and so I'm saying, no, it's all okay, it's great. She doesn't know I'm in any bad shit. I barely know I am, you know. I mean, the last few letters prior to that were, hey, this is great, I'm doing great, you know, so I'm not about to tell her, you know. And I didn't want it to be a deal, so it might have been part of the reason it didn't end up on the record.
Sure, because my understanding was that if you are wounded, they're going to send a message to your family, and some guy with a black car drives up to their house.
Ends up in the paper, or, you know, yeah.
And they
really didn't want that to happen.
Okay. And so basically you get patched up, but you're able to stay with the unit.
I go next mission, I'm back out again.
Okay.
So.
And now do things settle into some kind of routine for a little while, patrolling in the hills, or?
Not really. It was a different situation, I guess. Now I'm geared for, they're going to come in waves and attack us like a war. After that, it turned into about every 3-4 days, a couple of them would make contact and somebody'd get shot, and then they'd disappear. So they'd pop up here and there, and so it was constant fear. I got moved into the slack position. Then the guy he got shot. The slack guy or the point man I'd worked under. So I guess I wasn't quite ready to be point, so they moved me in under another guy from Minnesota who I kind of buddied up to because we grew up, you know, 30 miles apart, you know. And so me and him kind of, and he was walking point, and it wasn't in a couple of weeks I was walking point. I'd have to take a squad, he'd take a squad, so they'd flip us back and forth. So we started taking turns, and but I didn't mind the position. I figured out early on when I was with the guy's name was Randy Bink, and Randy's since died, but Randy was pretty keen on it by then too, and he probably had been at it a month, you know, so not long, not all that long in reality, but in that company it was looking like if you were there a couple of months, you were kind of like an old timer. You had some history already. You knew what's going on, and Randy and me were going up a hill. I was walking slack for him, and I know in the movie shortly they said 20 foot ahead of the rest of the guys. I think we were more like 200 foot ahead.
Yeah, that's more normal.
You
Longer
know,
distance is more
it
normal.
seemed we couldn't see the guys, but we were out in front. And we, you know, point slack, we'd stay fairly close together, you know. You know, and we were sort of separated, but we come past, and I'm pulling myself up a hill, and we could smell them. I told Randy, I said, they're here, you know. You know, we're kind of sign languaging. And all of a sudden I see Randy up in front of me, and he's giving me the going to, and he's going, pointing at me, and I'm going, you know. And I look off, just off to my shoulder, and I see a rifle barrel sticking out from under some canopy. And they had let us almost fall in there. We'd walk right by him, walk right by him. And just like that, Randy's got a grenade out, and it looks like he's throwing it to me, you know, and I'm going, holy shit, you know, and he's got the pin pulled, and I'm going, oh, geez, you know, so I grab one, and I pull it, and he throws it about the time I'm trying to run to my right and scurry away, and just like that, the deal flops up, and his grenade hits the back of the deal and sort of rolls back, and I throw it and it rolls right into the trench. And they are down in there trying to grab that thing and get it pitched out, and the guy, it looks just like it's coming out, and I'm jumping, and it blows up, and the one goes off first that was on the back side of it, and just like right after that, the other one went off. And after that, I decided, you know, it ain't all bad being point and slack. They're not going to shoot us. They're after that radio, you know, because that's what causes all the harm to them, brings in the hell, you know, that they can't deal with, you know. If they can split us up, and they can always get us later, you know. And I believe there was probably only the two of them, and then up on top of the hill there was 2 or 3 more, because they started firing down on us then. But that was after that, it was just every step was total fear, you know. And unless you couldn't smell them, and then we didn't walk the trails. We never tried to walk the trails. We always tried to. We'd cross the trail, we'd find the path where they'd been going, and then we'd try to back off and go around it, you know, because you knew they were going to set up wherever was easy going. People like to walk trails.
Okay, that was was this triple canopy in this area? Or
It
not?
was pretty bad. The higher the country, the less heavy canopy was down in the lower ground.
Yeah, you've got less undergrowth, so you could
The bigger
move
the
off.
trees, you could move off.
Yeah, all right. And so you are kind of learning this particular craft, I guess, getting reasonably good at doing point and slack over a space of a month or so. Now, are you kind of getting to know more of the guys in the platoon at this point and in the company, or?
Yeah, you're making friends, and then, you know, you'd make a friend, and then he'd get killed, or he'd get wounded, or, you know, so, but it in a short time frame, you made some really solid friendships, you know, you did. Me and Randy were inseparable, you know.
Now, what would you do when you were in the field at night?
We take turns, you know, somebody'd have to be on guard. You know, no one smoke pot. If some new guy would come in and he'd light up a pot, I mean, we're going to kill him. You know, that was all there is to it, you know, or leave him behind. Did that once. We left a couple guys behind. We just said, you know, they can't seem to get this out of their head that they're going to be smoking all the time, so we're just going to move on. So we never heard what happened to them. I don't know. We'd left. There was only 9 of us, and we said, well, we're all going to die if we don't get the heck away from these two. You know, they were new guys, and they'd come from another unit, and we was just going to deal with them, you know. So.
Right. Were you normally operating in squad-sized units or platoon-sized units, or?
Just squads. You know, I think, you know, if we were Never seemed like we had a dozen guys, you know, or any more than that. It was always, we were always short, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a machine gun, you didn't have anybody to carry the ammo, so half the time we didn't have a machine gun, you know. So we had usually the thumper, and we had a radio man, we had a lieutenant, but half the time we didn't have a lieutenant, we just had a sergeant. You
Yeah.
know,
So you might have been in effect like half of a platoon or something like that,
we
or
were always
whatever you
under,
had left.
always short, way
Yeah.
short.
Just a little whatever operational units they could construct from that. I don't know, how much did you see of the platoon or company officers?
Hardly ever. You know, I knew Workman just when we'd get pulled back into the rear and he'd give us a little pep talk, but we never seen him.
Okay, he was not somebody who'd be patrolling with you when you were out. Okay, all right. So you do this for a certain amount of time. So you're kind of now getting, you know, to May into June, kind of middle part of there. The Ripcord campaign is going on, but that's mostly not what your battalion normally has to worry about.
We had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
We didn't know,
Yeah,
we weren't in the loop on that part.
Right.
Nobody's telling us.
Okay. Now, did you stop off at any other fire bases?
We did. We would get resupplied on fire bases. Sometimes we'd pull guard duty for a few days and then back off to the bush. We primarily were on patrol, you know, around fire bases and walk onto a fire base maybe to get resupplied. If we got to a fire base, that was like R&R, you know. We could sleep in a little bunker, and at one point I'm in a bunker, and it was my turn to sleep in, and I wake up and I got a rat had climbed under my jacket and got up in my arm here, and so I'm beating on him and he bites me. So then they made me take these shots. So the medic had to give me a shot in the stomach every day, and that was more painful than getting shot. You know?
Rabies shots,
It
probably.
was extremely painful.
Ugh.
After the first few, you know, once you know it's coming and your stomach is all sore from being punched. I think it was a series of 20 shots. There's a lot of shots.
Yeah. All right, so you're kind of doing that, and then you kind of get into July, and then the Ripcord thing is kind of blowing up. And
Yeah, it seemed like it got progressively worse on these patrols. We were always making contact. Prior to that, you could go 2-3 days and never see anyone, and not even have a lot of canopy problems, or you know, they'd been there, but it had been a week prior, or it wasn't fresh. It wasn't that day, and it got to the point where it was every day we were running into something. We came across the hospital complex at one point, and we had to go in and flush through it, and it was just, you know, before that we'd find a little bunker. It was a dugout there, you know, little hole, go in under behind a rock or something, and they lived like rats under there. Well, this one had lights in it, you know, they had a generator going. It was major, and so we knew things weren't good in that area. You know, somebody hadn't been through there in a while. I mean, they didn't build this thing overnight because it was huge, you know, and I do recall we had a doctor in there that we shot in the process of flushing him out, and we got to looking at his billfold, and he had a California driver's license, and a picture of his wife and 2 kids, and he was way bigger than the rest of them, so we assumed he was Chinese, but he had been schooled in California.
wow.
Yeah, had a driver's license. He was speaking English, and we came in there saying something, and but you know, it's like you're 2 guys in a hole, and there's people all over, and you just don't have time to think. You know? I mean, you're thinking about survival, and you got a pistol, and you got a few grenades, and there's a lot more stuff in here than you were planned on. And
Okay. So there were still people in this hospital at the time that you guys go into it.
They were there. There was guys on. There was a guy on the operating table, I guess you'd call it. You know, his stomach was open, and they were working on him. You know.
Okay.
So we kind of dropped into something we had no idea what we were into, and there was only, I think, 8 of us at the time. There was many guys, and we lost one guy there that day, and I don't recall. We lost a couple of guys up on Ripcord prior to the events. They got blew up we were on guard position around the hill, and Curly, who was a friend of mine, he was with another guy, and I don't recollect his name right offhand. I could tell you if I was. But I relieved him, or he relieved me. I was in the hole, and it was dark, and towards evening, and he got in and took my position, and I went back to sleep, and I'm walking across the fire base, and all of a sudden go, whoom, you know, and the concussion, I felt it knock me down, and we went back, and all we found was, we did find Crowley's boot that morning, and with his dog tag tied in the boot, and so, so you lose your buddies, you know, and we blame that on a Chuhoi. We had this Vietnamese that was supposed to be our guide, and what he was trying to do, I guess, was blow a hole in the perimeter, knock out a position or two, and then the zappers tried to sneak up the hill that night.
Yeah.
Of course, they lowered the guns and you know, and deflected that, but that was one of the earlier attempts, I think, for them to get onto Ripcord, you know.
Okay, well, were you actually on the Ripcord perimeter at that point?
We were, yeah, we
Okay.
were doing guard duty.
All right, because there was a phase there when the 2506 had gone for stand down in June, and most of them were back at Camp Evans, and you might well have been relieving some of them.
We were
at that
relieving
moment.
some when they pulled us out
Yeah.
there. We went back off a patrol, and we weren't back for a full day, and before evening that day, we got shipped out to that fire base, and we were a little pissed because, you know, we'd just been, you know, 10 days out there, and pretty miserable, and had lost a lieutenant at the time and a couple of our guys, and we were pretty distraught over that whole situation because it hadn't been good going, and it was kind of the rainy season. The leeches were at a premium then, you know. You'd come through a creek bed and you'd have leeches hanging on your nutsack that long, and everybody had jungle rot, and it's like your pants would rot off you, you know. And then we get back and you give us new clothes and you feed us. We thought, well, aren't we going to get a meal or something, you know? And we right back out on a chopper, and away you go again. Of course, we lost half our guys because they were at dispensary getting treated for foot rot and whatnot.
Yeah. So it's just kind of, sounds like it's just degenerating. I mean, the unit's
Our
getting smaller.
spirits were bad. We weren't shaving, we weren't getting haircuts, and we didn't care, you know.
And you didn't have a lot of really experienced guys either, did you?
We kept getting new people.
Yeah.
We kept getting new people. We got, I think about that same time we picked up another guy from Minnesota, and they said, you know, you're in charge of him. They always gave you one.
Yeah.
And you get them and you lose them, and you get them, and so, you know, you felt a sense of responsibility for them too, if they give them to you, you know. And
Yeah.
so we end up on Ripcord, and that was like middle of the afternoon. They dump us in there, and we're coming into the LZ, and you could see them running all over, and I knew it was a bad situation. There was a down chopper, and one mine landed, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 new guys with us, and it's like, oh shit, you know.
Well, is this a phase now where the enemy is bombarding Ripcord? I mean, are
They
the mortars
are.
coming in?
We're
or-
off on the hill on the side, but
Yeah.
we're not going to the fire base now.
Okay,
We're going, I think
yeah.
it's on the 20th or something like that,
Yeah.
in July.
Yeah.
And now I see the movie today. I had no idea that they were getting that much hell before us. And, you know, my thought was, well, why'd they dump us in right in the middle of all these gooks that were
Yeah.
running around?
Yeah.
Because there's 56 of us, I think, got in there, and there was way more of them. I mean, I counted 50 coming in, you know. You know, just running around, trying to get off the hill where we were supposed to be landing because they were bombarding it with.
Right.
I never seen so many Cobras in one spot, circling so close around where we were landing, completely just firing into that LZ. I mean, they were shooting right into the same LZ. I think there was a 51 cal that had knocked a chopper out there.
I think they were landing you on a hill called Triple Hill.
I believe that's what they
Yeah,
call
you
it.
go in there, and then you've got to, suppose, march over to another hill.
Yeah.
And so you land there, and initially there's not a lot of opposition on the ground, or you could
There's
move.
a small arms fire, but when we land, yeah, but there was trenches and bunkers right there. We were right on top of them.
Yeah.
They'd sort of been bombed out.
Right.
So the first thing we got to do is secure a perimeter and move to the next ridge, I guess is what we were trying to do. And we had a little discussion. Good friend of mine, Patrick DeWolf, and we called him Little Bit, a little blonde kid from Michigan. Quite a talker, quite a character, yeah, a pretty brave little guy, you know. I mean, and then a fellow from Texas. Oh golly, I'm gonna lose my thought here now. Another good guy, and he was a good point man. And me and Randy were in the same squad, so we essentially had 4 point guys, you know, in one squad at that point, you know, which is like, hey, who's gonna carry some of this other shit, you know? And Randy says, me and Dale will take this, and he says, no, I've already put Valley. The lieutenant, Randy Thompson at the time, kind of like Valley. Valley was a little more quiet, a little more reserved, very serious kind of guy. Maybe he felt a little more comfortable with it. And he says, "No, I've got Valley." And Valley, Matt or Patrick was DeWolf was his slack man. So So he says, I need you, Randy, over here by the radio, and Dale, you follow them up, you stick with them and cover their ass. So I was right up front with them. We didn't space out at that point because we were just trying to get to a position. You know?
Right.
And they walked right into a mortar platoon right at the ridge of a hill, and it just like all of a sudden all hell broke up. We were going from tree to tree because we'd seen gooks, and we were making some small arms fire, but not that bad, and just like that, Valley took it right through the chest, and I seen him go down, and then shortly after that, Matt got hit. He was out in front of there was big cypress trees, they were huge in that area, and there wasn't a lot of ground cover, there wasn't a lot of shrubbery, and Matt slumped down against a tree and was just wailing, and some of the guys probably told you they heard him hollering, and I was probably 50 foot away, and the bullets were hitting, and I got down behind a tree, and then I tried to move to the next tree forward, and I got to that one, and I wasn't far from him when a gook ran right by me and just stuck his gun right into his belly, and I don't know if he didn't see me or what, but he just about hit me. He went right over the top of me, and I got him in the back as he turned around, and I looked to my left, and I see mortar tubes going off. They were lighting up mortar tubes right there. We were right in their deal, you know, and I don't see anybody else, and Randy says, "Pull back, Dale, pull back," and so I knew that those two were gone. And I'm coming back up the hill, and I see Browning go down, and he was relatively new at our company too, and I kind of lost track of everybody else. I didn't see Randy at that point. I was moving from tree to tree, and I was shooting up my ammo pretty fast, and I found a tree that had blew up like a crater, you know. It was like a stump was tipped over, and I was kind of down under that, and I had a hell of a position. I could see 5 mortar tubes right in front of me, and I would every once in a while pick one off, you know, so I was grabbing them, and but I didn't know where the other guys were, and it was sort of getting dusk out, I believe, at the time, and it seemed like this was a time frame that lasted for hours, but it really probably wasn't, you know. I learned later. And I see Knott coming down the hill towards me, right out in the middle, and I see about 5 gooks right in front of us there at the mortar tube, all motioning and pointing, and I'm shooting at them, and I go, oh shit, you know. John's gonna walk, you know. I had no idea what he was doing. He had his rucksack, he had his gear on, and I didn't have it. I was running out of ammo. And there he is, got his helmet on. I'd lost my helmet, that got blown off, we got hit, and I'd got grazed through the forehead. And it was, you know, so I left my gun, I just jumped out to grab him. I was gonna pull him into my hole. And as I grabbed him, I looked, and a guy from under the door in front was probably 50 foot with an RPG on his shoulder, and the last thing I remember is a flash. And one of the other guys said he's seen us, a guy from, he's came to reunion, and he thought I was dead. He really had a little problem with that. Was back in Indianapolis, one of the first ones. And so at that point, I don't know what happened. He just said, I can't believe I swore you're dead. I tried to get your name on the wall. I've called people about it, you know. And he's seen us fly through the air, and I do not remember anything then for a day. I lost all recollection. At one point, I can remember, it's like flashes. It's like, you know, bright light. I don't know, when we were going out there on stand-on right before we left Ripcord, the chaplain came around, and he was giving out medals, and he said, here, take one of these, you know, and I said, is that supposed to save my life? And he goes, they tell me if you believe it will. And it was a miraculous medal, a Mary medal I called it, you know. And I grabbed that thing, and I said, you know, if there's any chance in hell of surviving, or if you got any power, man, I'm with you on this. I need you now, you know. And I do remember them, and I don't know what point it was, but I had a vest on, and I had it sewed by a gal, Vietnamese gal in headquarters company, but it was like a pouch vest. I seen somebody else had one of the recon guys, and it held like 40 magazines, and it spread them out over your body, and you put your ruck over it. And it really worked good, you know, because you didn't have them on your belt hanging out and snagging up on brush. So when you're walking point or in heavy brush, it was like a vest, and it was like a hunting vest, you know. And they rolled that off. They were taking that off of me, and there was a bunch of them hanging around me. It broke both eardrums, so it's like loud ringing, you know. And so it wasn't. It's like the war got muffled, you know, the bombs going off and all the. But you know, you could still smell everything. Smell like burning flesh, you know. But I remember that, and in the dark, I kind of kept crawling downhill, and I thought at one point maybe I was in a creek, but the guy said there's no creek, but I was in water. So I probably got in a bomb crater, and there was water in it, and I laid in there. And I remember nothing until Randy at one point left the platoons, went down looking for me. One of the guys had told him, he blew off that hill. And Randy just wondered, and he told me later, he says, I didn't know where anybody else was anymore, and I just knew you went that way, and I had to come find you. And so he dragged me back up to the perimeter. And then that's the time Lawrence Rosin came in looking for his down chopper buddy to rescue him, and I got onto that chopper. Randy threw me onto that chopper. I do remember I was hanging off the edge, and I do remember Schultz hanging on a skid. I have visions of that. I do recall that. So some of the things are, do I really know that? Don't I know that? I don't know a whole month after that. Really, I remember coming off a ramp on a hospital ship, and they said I was on a hospital ship, but you know, I can remember coming off of that. But apparently I had a pretty bad concussion, you know. I got grazed to the forehead, and then I got RPG. They took a lot of shrapnel out of my left side and out of my shoulder, and but nothing, you know, it clots, it burns, and so it stung a lot, but it wasn't all that painful. I didn't have a lot of pain other than the ringing sound in the eardrums. So.
All right, and that's got to pretty well finish off the war for you with that.
That was the end of my war, yeah.
Okay. Now, do they send you back to a stateside hospital or Japan, or where you go?
No, I was in a field hospital after I come off the hospital ship, I think up in Da Nang someplace.
All right.
And then at a point they put me in a headquarters company where they were doing body counts, where they were, and that was up in Da Nang. And once again, I was without a unit, you know.
Right.
And eventually I got on a transport, and they sent me back to Fort Lewis, Washington. And then I was in the hospital there for a while where they did some surgery on my shoulder. And then they sent me to Minneapolis to the VA hospital there. And then I was supposed to get up in the morning and put the flag up, and that's when I borrowed a Jeep and got in trouble. And I wasn't inclined to get up and put up the flag for him. I was pretty much figured I didn't want nothing to do with the military anymore. And my sister was going to the U at the time, and so her and her girlfriends lived in a house down by campus, and I would go down there, and they were going to anti-war protest things, and I was very confused about the whole thing. You know, I hated them, and I hated the war, and I had totally lost all faith, and you know, and I wasn't a anti-war protester. I did show up at a few of them, but you had mixed emotions. You know, I knew the war had to stop. It was wrong. But what I was hearing from them, we were baby killers, and so I was really on the wrong side of the situation, you know.
All right. But now once you're kind of out of the hospital, but they discharge you pretty soon, or?
Yeah, my dad had a heart attack, and so they essentially sent me home.
Right.
I think they were gonna patch me up and put me back into, you know, they're trying to get me back into doing clerical processing type things, and after he had his heart attack, then they sent me home back to the farm. So that was the end of it.
All right.
I never did have to go back.
Okay. And then after that, you get back home and so forth. What do you do with yourself now that you're out of the Army?
Well, you know, like I said, I was kind of lost for a bit, you know. Of course, I had to take care of the farm because Dad was not healthy until he got back on his feet, and well, then I knocked up a gal, so then pretty soon I'm a daddy. Well, that sort of changes your life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, nobody's too proud of that, you know, especially in a small community like that.
Mhm.
But we had a wonderful life. My wife and I got along good, you know.
Mhm.
So we had 3 kids, and after the 3rd kid was born, she had postpartum depression and she shot herself. But I had a hard time with that because I didn't have any feelings towards it. And so her family thought I was pretty nonchalant about it, but it was hard for me to understand, you know. It was just, how the hell can you do that? You know, it just didn't make sense to me because I was so happy to be alive, you know. And so there was nothing ever in life that's been able to really hold me back. And so, you know, when people say I couldn't do something, I couldn't work for no one.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that in short order after several job attempts, that there was no way in hell I was ever going to be able to work for someone, you know. So I had to learn to survive on my own. We weren't raised in a wealthy family, you know. I
So
knew
what kind
I
of
was
work-
never going to eat rice or oatmeal again in my life.
Okay. So what kind of work did you go into?
Ended up raising turkeys for a guy that had set up a turkey plant. You probably heard of him, Butterball Turkeys, Earl Beals, and Earl kind of liked me, and threw some contracts my way. Well, I was able to get borrow large sums of money on his shirt tails, you know, as long as I raised birds for him. And
Right.
so I did a lot of turkey raising and raised a lot of cattle. Ended up, he was getting bought out, and he says, "You don't want to be a part of this anymore, Hormel's going to buy it up." And Hormel was, they traded me for hog contracts, so I went and built hog barns pretty much all over the country. Kind of company barns for them, and also, but I had ownership, and I was able to sell out of that. And one of my contractors at the time was building some senior housing and assisted living, and I jumped into that, and I made a lot of money.
All right.
So I've done well.
Okay. Yeah. Now, once you got out, I mean, did you talk to people much about what you did in Vietnam or what
Just
happened?
me and Randy would get together. No matter, Randy couldn't hold a job either. He'd try, he'd get in jail, he'd get fired. He kind of moved up to the woods of North Country. He'd inherited a little money when his dad died. And so he was kind of recluse, but Randy, I could always count on him. If I needed somebody to be someplace on a job, Randy would be there, and we could be together. I think the first 10 years I'd never slept in a bed. I had to be in the basement. I had to have 4 walls behind me. It was the only way I could sleep. Honestly, sleep. I still don't sleep good in motels. I wake up every hour, and I got to get rebearings. If everything's secure, then I can go back to sleep. But I've built that into my system, and if I drink enough booze, I'll sleep for 5 hours, and I'm fine. But you never go to bed without your booze, you know.
Okay.
So when you go to the doctor and they say, "Do you drink?" Yeah, I drink socially. I never drink alone. I never go home and open up a drink, you know. I always got to have a drink with someone, you know, my wife or whatever. But if I can have some wine or something before I go to bed, I can sleep. But it's my way of dealing with it, and I've been able to weasel my way through life doing that.
Okay.
So
Now, at what point did you connect with the Ripcord Association?
it was, I believe, when they were going to Shreveport. I think Tony Cox is the one that kind of was dragged us all out of the woodwork, I think.
Yeah.
No, actually, I believe it was, no, the first one was at Indianapolis, I guess. They had, I was on Minnesota Pork Council, and they had a big deal going there, pork producers, and Tony had called me up shortly before that, and I says, "Well, by golly, Tony, I'm going to be in Indianapolis. We're supposed to be at the Indy 500 for this deal, and I'm only going to be there for a couple days." And he says, "Well, you got to stop by."
Yeah.
And they had their deal at the fairgrounds, and I went out there, and they had that moving wall, and I had no contact, no interest in any of that ever, and met some of the guys, and wow, you know, it was very disturbing for a while. I kind of left there, only spent a few hours with them, and I walked away from that and said, maybe I need to know more, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I think the need to know was always there, but I'd kind of buried it. And so me and Randy had our own version of what it was. We had a lot of guilt. We had a lot of guilt. We felt, you know, we let a little bit down. We let Browning down. We let Knott down. I had went up to, you know, sometime shortly after I got out, I went up to Pine River where John Knott was from, and I went to look up his family. I thought he's got a bunch of brothers. He had a sawmill. He told me, you know, I knew enough, and my uncle up there we used to deer hunt up there. That was where I was going deer hunting. I thought, well, I'm going up deer and I'm going to check out the Knotts, you know. And I went to the Legion or the VFW club, and they ask, and they go, no, nobody knew nothing. Well, yeah, there was some kid, you know, yeah, they live out of town here. And one guy come in there from the lumber area, and he says, yeah, I know them. I know his brother. I'll call him. And so a big burly guy comes up, and John was a little guy, this bigger guy, and he says, what the hell you want? I go, I just, you know, thought I was with your brother, John, and he goes, he ain't dead, he's missing. Don't you dare talk to Ma. He said, Dad's passed on. Don't you dare talk to Ma. You got no right being here. He goes, stay the hell away from my family. He turned around and walked out.
Wow.
And then I sat there for a little bit and thought, wow, this is not cool. You know, this is not what I expected, you know. Thought maybe they wanted to talk to me, you know. I mean, I felt guilty. I was going to do a little confessing, you know. You know, he essentially saved my life, I guess, because I think he took the brunt of that. You know, he took that RPG because I was all guts, and that's why they didn't kill me.
Yeah.
They figured I was dead, you know, because I was. So, I let it lay for about 10 years, and then I finally had a plaque made up, and I took it up to the VFW, and I posted it in there. Billboard asked the guy, can you open up that glass cabinet out front? But you lost a guy in Vietnam out of this town. You know, he was from your community, and I think it's just plain wrong. All you got is, because I was president of the local VFW back home, and that was another whole story, because the old guys from World War II had no liking of us young guys. You know, we were just, they said we weren't in the real war. You know, so anyhow, so I just felt, you know, hey, these VFW Cubs they gotta recognize that if we're members, you know, that we need to be recognized. So I took a nice plaque, and you know, there was a bunch of guys in the club said, this is wonderful, we never even knew this guy, you know.
Yeah.
And they wrote up a little deal, and I told Randy, I said, it's for me and you, you know, and he wouldn't go. He said, I want a part of that, and
All right.
I'm sorry, we can quit.
No, this is sort of about done, filled out the tape, but I think it's actually kind of a good place to conclude. So you kind of got a certain piece of that resolved, and you're still standing.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming in and sharing the story today.
And I'm glad I'm here. So.